Hi everyone, it's 6:25 a.m. Looks to be March 19th, 2018, I'm told. I'm going to try to make this as coherent as possible. It's not easy because of the sheer volume of material that there is to try to make some sense out of. Now, in addition to developing the language charts, which have thus far been helpful, I'm also working on charts that sketch out the 12 tribes of Israel, their blessings. So those would be prophetic, whether it be from Jacob or Moses or Balaam, whomever. And then what the Bible records were their allotments and where they may have expanded to. There is an extremely dense amount of information in the first 7 books of the Bible as we know it to be laid out. So that's Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, and Judges. You're going to get a lot of information there. Now, for anyone who's paid attention to the preceding videos to this one dealing with the same subject matter, you'll know that I've looked at a number of issues that would challenge the status quo idea, which everybody just takes as a given, that the events recorded in the Bible happened in or around what we know today as Palestine, Egypt, Lebanon, and what we also know as Mesopotamia, which is supposed to be this area on the map pretty much between the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers, that our good translators have typically translated as Mesopotamia, although the actual name of it is Aram Nehaluth, if I got that right. And I can double check. Actually, I'm sorry, it's not the Nahal, it's Ner. Where's it at? Go back to the Ner. Yeah, there it is. I'm sorry. It's Aram Nerim. My bad. They translated as Mesopotamia. I think a rough translation of Aram Nerim could be Kingdom of the Waterways, waters. I don't know what kind of water Ner is yet. I really don't. I think I'm a lot further along with figuring out what kind of water a Nahal is, because Nahal can be used as either a body of running water, or it's oftentimes translated as a valley. What I believe from what I've found thus far is that a Nahal is both the actual geographical feature of a channel that water runs through, and the outlying areas of it. So not just its banks, but the land that would, I suppose, technically be fed by or enriched by that Nahal. Thus far, I'd have to say it. A Nahal definitely seems to be a river. Is it big and small? I think so. It could be very large or very small. It seems. But it definitely also includes the land on either side of it that would be enriched by it. It all seems to be the same thing. Okay? So, could it be a wadi, like dry channels that during rainy seasons a lot of water rushes through? I don't think so. I personally don't think so, because in Leviticus 11, when Yahweh is describing what fish that Yisrael should eat, he says not, this is out of all the fish in the seas, the waters, various waters, and Nahal. And wadis being a temporal thing just during heavy rains in areas that are known to be arid, with just certain seasons of rains being heavy enough to actually fill the wadis, they're not going to have diverse kinds of fish and life in them, although there might be types of marine animals that would bore in and sort of, hibernate when it's dry and come back out when it's wet. But I'm not seeing that as what's being described in Leviticus 11, 9 and 10. Now, I can promise you something. If I could just see the land over there, Palestine and the outlying areas, if I could just see it as the land being described in the Bible, I would drop this like a hot potato, okay? Because I would probably see it as something that wasn't very productive. Unfortunately, the more I read through, the more I see that Palestine, Egypt, the outlying areas, they don't fit. They just don't fit. For one thing, Egypt, modern-day Egypt, is west of Palestine. There may be a Mediterranean Sea that's due west of Palestine, but Egypt is still west of it. No matter how you look at it, it is still west. The Bible never once describes Mitzrayim, because it's Mitzrayim, and they've made it Egypt. Never describes Mitzrayim as being west of the Promised Land. Also, Judah's inheritance. It is said that their inheritance went all the way to the Nahal Mitzrayim, the river of Egypt. Now, men who want to convince us that these things occurred in that area, they want to tell us, well, there is a wadi in this area of the Sinai Peninsula. There's a wadi in here, and that's what it would mean. But as I told you from Leviticus 11, Nahal cannot be a wadi. So then we would have to believe that the territory of Judah went all the way to the Nile. And in Exodus, the main waterway of Mitzrayim is called the Yar. And I can tell you that its description and the description of Israel's time in Mitzrayim and all of the details about Mitzrayim I've noticed since, they just don't add up. I'm probably going to, in the course of this video, mention a number of things that I don't have answers for. They're just, chalk them up as things that make you go, And that's great. And think about it. And let your imagination go crazy. And see if you can actually come up with something concrete. If not, then you can't. But I've done a lot of work on this. And so I can offer you a number of things that should definitely make you scratch your head or wonder about. One thing, I pulled up a list of, it's on Wikipedia, it's called List of Rivers of Israel. And here you can see them all at the left. And then there's the Dead Sea and the Sea of Galilee, which they're going to say is, Kunruth. Now, when you think of the land of Palestine and outlying areas, I'm sure what you would mostly think is, if you thought seas, what seas? Well, I would guess then you would probably just basically think, okay, Mediterranean, right? Dead Sea here, Sea of Galilee to the north, and then the Red Sea, which would have to be, well, either here or here, right? Because we're told, it's got 2 fingers here, so where was the crossing of the Red Sea? We don't know. The Bible doesn't say that the Red Sea has 2 fingers either. But we're told it does, you see. There's the Gulf of Aqaba and the Gulf of Suez here. But those are pretty much the only seas, if you're going to think of seas. And I think it's kind of crazy to even call the Sea of Galilee a sea. It's absolutely tiny. It's very, very small. And I've got Israel blown up on my map right here so that it looks like there's something substantial to it. I don't even like calling it Israel. It's not real. But as I pull out, I look at it in comparison to the size of all these other countries and how, if it really did happen in a land this small, it could have happened almost anywhere. And look at it let's see if I can get the whole map on screen. So look at this, it's tiny little sliver, this tiny little sliver here. And look at the whole world. Look at all the lands there are that we know of in the world that have a sea on the western border. That's a lot of lands, right? Well, something I find really interesting, first off, is that the sea and I'm going to have to call it Canaan, or Canaan. because I don't want to call it Israel. Israel is a people. It's not necessarily a land. And I know that, in the Bible, in the Hebrew Scriptures, you can find it called, from time to time, Aretz Yisrael. But the thing is that the occupation that they had of that land was conditional. So before they were given that land, it was just known as the land of Canaan. And in fact, a lot of different peoples lived there. So for now, I just want you to know I'm going to be mostly referring to it as Canaan, because I don't want to call it Palestine. This place over here in the Middle East, to the east of the Mediterranean, that's Palestine. So we're talking about the land that Israel was given by Yahweh on conditions. That would be Canaan. So there's a lot of land that could possibly, be potential areas for Canaan. Now, concerning direction, I'm not really even going to get that much into direction right now, because we don't know for sure if they've been flipped, if they've been toyed with. We don't know. But for now, I guess we'll have to just assume that the directions are correct. Now, the east and west portions would probably have to be correct, because we can see them frequently in relation to the sun coming up or the sun going down. And that's a big deal. But the north and south, I don't know. I'm not 100% at this point. I find it very strange, it's very odd that in Genesis, I want to say it's Genesis chapter 12, there was a famine in the land. It's Genesis 12:10, and Abram went down to Mitzrayim, to live. Well, what's strange is this. The word down, does it necessarily mean south? I'm not sure if that means south, if it means elevation per se. There's been a lot of trickery in translations. So all right, so it's not 12:20. I'd go to 13. I'm sorry. So Abraham went up out of Mitzrayim, he, his wife, all he had, and Lot with him, into the south. If that doesn't make you scratch your head and think, then I just don't know. Well, the word here is Negeb. So people could say, well, yes, he went up out of Mitzrayim, out of Egypt, into the Negeb. Oh, I don't know. Are you right? Well, the thing is, Negeb is supposed to be here, okay? And if they were staying in the good part of Mitzrayim, if it really is Egypt, they would have been here at the delta, and he would have simply had to have gone directly east, not up out of. And Negeb means south. It's used all the time for direction, and it not having to do with what today is called the Negev Desert. So again, we've got these seas, right? This sea here, and we've got the Dead Sea, this Sea of Galilee, which they say is they say it's the same as the people would know it as like Kinneret. That's Kanruth in the Bible. And then maybe one arm or the other of the Red Sea. But I did a search on Yam, which is sea. And I came up with some interesting finds. First off, I'm going to tell you what seas are listed having to do with this land. There is Yam e Mele, which is translated as Sea the Salt, or Sea of Salt. And we may get into the whole salt thing before we're done. Don't know. There is Yam Soup, and that's what they say is the Red Sea, or they say it's the Sea of Reeds. But the thing is, Supa 5492 is translated as storm or strong wind. It's also translated, soup is also translated as end or conclusion. It's very interesting if you do a word study on soup and the variations of soup. So there's that. And we could say, all right, so far we've got an equivalent of the Dead Sea, right, with Yam e Mele. We've got an equivalent of the Red Sea with Yam Soup. Maybe. Now we've got Yam Gadul. This is always the one when we're talking about Israel's western border. It's this Yam Gadul, and it means sea the great. And then next we so then we could have an equivalent of the Mediterranean, right? Then we have Yam Kunruth, and that's what they tell us is the Lake Galilee or the Sea of Galilee. Yam Kunruth. But then we've got this Yam Yapwa. Well, what's Yam Yapwa? It's 3305 in Strong's, whom I do not trust, but they will give us the occurrences. Now, what is Yapwa? Yapwa. Oh, it's Joppa. It's Joppa. That's interesting. Now, its occurrences, there's not a lot. There's only like 4. And at first, Yapwa occurs in Joshua 19:46, listing parts of the border. Let's go to Joshua 19 real quick. We'll even go to 1946. Why not? But we'll have to back up a little bit because it's going to tell us what this is in context to. The 7 lot came out of for the tribe, the children of Dan. And the Gabul, not coast, it's Gabul, it's border. So that, when they stick coast in there, that's very misleading. All right, and it's giving the cities along its coast, right? And the border before Yipua. That's it right there. Rekon with the border before Yipua. And the Gabul of the children of Dan went out for them, therefore the children of Dan went up to fight against Sham and took it, smote it with the edge of the sword. Now, where Dan is at is very interesting. We're going to get to that in the future, as well as where Simeon or Shimon is. So that's one reference concerning the border of Dan. Got Yipua. Now, 2 Chronicles 2:16, and we will cut wood out of the Lebanon, as much as thou shalt need, and we will bring it to thee in floats by sea to Joppa, and thou shalt carry it up to Jerusalem. And they gave money. Now we've got Ezra 3:7. They gave money also unto the masons, and to the carpenters, and meat and drink and oil, unto them of Zidon and Tyre, it should be Tsur and Sidon, to bring cedar. We don't know that it's cedar trees, but cedar trees from the Lebanon. Remember, it's always the Lebanon because it's describing a sort of it's more of a descriptive, just like the Galil. Anyways, to the Sea of Joppa, according to the grant they had from Cyrus, king of Persia. And then the last time you'll see Joppa's Iupla is in Jonah. It says that he was going to go unto Tarshish, which they still don't know where that is exactly, from the presence of Yahweh, and he went down to, and there it is. So, Yipwa. And I guess a lot of people could say, well, the Mediterranean is Yipwa. Okay, well, back to the map. So you've got, right now, it would be, unless I'm absolutely incorrect. Oh, I don't think I am. In the area of Tel Aviv / Yaffo. In this basic area, is where they would say Joppa is. Okay. Well, there's really nothing that I would personally say could be considered as, you know, the Sea of Joppa. Maybe a bay or an inlet or something like that. Something that would distinguish it. Now, you could say that I'm splitting hairs, and that's fine if you want to. Go ahead and say that. But we still have the fact that Ezra is referring to the Sea of Joppa, or Ipua. And of course, I understand that this chunk of the Mediterranean right here is also referred to as the Levantine Sea. I understand that. I'm just giving you the facts here. So, if that weren't enough, what about this Yam Kadmoni? This Yam Kadmoni. It's 6931. So we can take a look at that and see what's going on there. All right. Now, it comes from the root of Kadem, which could either mean ancient or former, or it's supposed to also mean eastern, in that direction. And you'll see that usually when it's used, the proverb of the ancients, or where they went before, neither consider the things of old, the door of the east gate, old time. It's interesting. What's really interesting, though, is when you get to Ezekiel 47. And in Ezekiel 47 and 48, Yahweh is describing a message that he wants Ezekiel to deliver to all of the tribes of Israel, which, of course, by now, the bulk of them have been displaced. They are not living in the area of Canaan, the promised land. And he says through the prophet, "And the east side ye shall measure from Haran, and from Damsak," which is translated Damascus, "and from Gilead, Galod, and from the land of Yisrael by Yarden," translated Jordan, "from the border unto the east sea." And this is the east side. The east sea. And no, it can't be the Dead Sea. If you understand where he's talking about, you try to translate that to the map, he says, and from the land of Yisrael by Jordan, from the border unto the East Sea. Well, in modern-day Palestine, the Jordan empties into the Dead Sea. So he's talking about from the Jordan, there it is, right, to the East Sea. I'm just going to head eastward. Boy, I'm not finding anything. I guess if you want to try to consider one of these lakes in Iraq, is that what you want to call the East Sea? Because the Euphrates is running right up here too. What about that? It's the Parath. Boy, doesn't look like we got one. What are you talking about? The Persian Gulf? Do you think we're looking at the Persian Gulf? That Yahweh would want Ezekiel to give a message to the dispersed tribes? That they would once again have this inheritance, and a big bulk of it would stretch right through this uninhabitable, horrific hell on earth desert right here? Well, I don't know. So we've got an East Sea there. An East Sea. That's kind of weird, right? Well, past that, we also have this Yam Arun. And that's 314. So let's just take a look at it. Okay, Ahurun. And that means after. So I guess like that first one, Quadamuni, meant either before or ancient, right? So this one, they say it is used actually as after or hindermost. You can see it right here. In these references, the voice of the latter sign, they shall go hindmost with their standards. Uttermost sea shall your coast be. Here's Deuteronomy 11:24. Every place whereon the sole of your feet shall tread shall be yours, from the wilderness and the Lebanon. From the river, that's a Ner. From the Ner Parat, even unto the uttermost sea shall your coast be. And there's plenty of other references to the uttermost sea or the after sea. It seems to be describing an extremity, right? The uttermost sea. Well, if like a lot of people want to say, they want to say that it was supposed to be from Euphrates over here. And Euphrates runs basically up this area here. So kind of, what do we want to say? Northwest to southeast, sort of, but not exactly at a 45. Either way. So from here to the uttermost sea, or afterward sea. Again, I hope he's not referring to any of the portion of the Euphrates until you get into at least Upper Syria or so, because the land from there westward is horrible, uninhabitable desert. As is pretty much all the land south of what is today called Jerusalem, too. We're talking about not a nice place to be. So that there is this sea, and it's mentioned a number of times. In fact, let's see. I know it's mentioned. It should be mentioned again in Ezekiel, although I could be passing up a lot of references. There is one reference that I think is really interesting too. It's in Joel 2:20. But I will remove far off from you the northern army, and will drive him into a land barren and desolate, with his face towards the sea, the east sea, so it was that last one I mentioned, and his hinder part towards the utmost sea. And his stink shall come up, and his ill savour shall come up, because he hath done great things. So even if you want to say, well, that second one there, the utmost sea, Yam Aharun, that's the Mediterranean. Must just be another name for it. If that's the case, then you still have the ancient or eastern sea, this Kadmoni, that you have to deal with. And if all of that weren't enough, you also have Yam Pelishtim, and that's 6430. A lot of people would say that's Philistines, because that's how it's usually translated. It's Philistines. But I don't do things the way that the Masoretes say I should do things. So, Paleshtim. They say, look at this in Strong's. Philistine equals immigrants. Oh, really? Okay. So let's see. A lot of the references are going to be like the land of the Philistines, land, Philistines, Abimelech, king of the Philistines. There's Abimelech again, and the Philistines envied him. Okay, the Philistines, they stopped up wells. Okay, the land of the Philistines. Exodus 23:31, and I will set your bounds from Yamsup even unto Yam Pelishtim, and from the Midbar, not desert, unto the Ner. Now, trust me when I say that these things don't just come quick and easy, because just like with the globe, from the earliest days, those of us who were raised in church environments have been shown things that have just gotten into our heads. We've been told that this is it. When you think of the place where these things happened, you have to think of Palestine, the outlying areas, and Egypt. But I'm telling you, it's not me. It isn't me. It's the text that challenges that. It's not me. Now, the same thing with rivers applies. I looked through this list of rivers in around Palestine. It's Israel. If you punch in rivers of Palestine, you get bupkis. You get a really pathetic list because of the fact that the Jews have kind of taken the land, you know. A lot of it they bought, but a lot of it's been taken rather, what I would say is criminal in pretty underhanded ways too. Now let's see. Okay, so they show a lot of these. Some of them are just creeks. You don't even have water here. You got this little mud puddle here. Anyways, I would suggest, look through a list like this. I mean, the area that we know of as Palestine or Israel today, it's not that it has no waterways, no creeks and rivers. It does. Virtually every land there is has creeks, rivers, and things like this. I mean, that's the whole point, is this could be in so many different places. I mean, so many different places. And by the way, a whole lot of the rivers of Palestine are polluted because of the industry and irresponsible industrial practices. Anyways, one thing I find is that's really interesting, and I'm not sure if it's not this. I don't think it's Basur, and I don't think it's not Lachish. There's one river here that in the Bible it's called Yabak. And I know that it's somewhat similar. There's some long S's. That's not it. One thing that's really interesting too, you'll find, is a lot of these, when they give a history, like you'll see it with the Jordan, they'll go right to the Bible, where it's mentioned in the Bible. But what's really funny is a lot of these, they can't match them up to parts of the Bible. And I find that kind of not funny, but Lachish, it's one of these that they're going to say is actually the equivalent of Yabak. See, this one right here, they can't find a biblical equivalent. This Basur, if you check the references to it in the Bible, it doesn't seem to match up as far as its size. I mean, it just doesn't match up, I'm afraid. I really want to find, though, I don't know that it's the Yarmouk. I had to look through a lot of these before I even started this. I can tell you where it is at, though. Let's see. It's not going to be that. You know, I hate when this happens. It actually is what we're talking about. It is a tributary of the Jordan. Let's try the Yarmouk. That may be the one we're looking at. Let's see. Doesn't say. Let's see. Nope. Nope. Oh, that's not it. So let's just go to the Jordan. Now hopefully it will, yeah, it's got tributaries right here. It's the Jabbok. They call it Jabbok to this day, but it wasn't listed on that list. And that's what I'm trying to find right now. There's a good reason why I'm trying to find that. Yarmouk, Zarqa. And again, they're not showing it here. I don't know if I'm going to have to actually punch in rivers of Jordan. But obviously I clicked on Yarmouk. Well, I hate when that happens. I can show you on the map, though, just so we can get down to it. So right in this area, and they might show us as we zoom in. It's possible, but on this kind of map, we're mostly going to see roads more than rivers and streams. Yeah. Okay. So I'm gonna zoom out a little bit. All right. So where the Jabbok is, it's in this area where my mouse is floating. All right. And what they tell you is that it's the equivalent of the biblical Jabbok. And I'll see if I can find that on my list real quick. The Jabbok is a Nahal. It's not a Ner. And there is a difference between Nahal and Ner. I don't know what the exact differences are, but I can attest to the fact that there is a difference between those two kinds of waters. So what I'm looking for, it's right here, Nahal Jabbok, 2999. So let's take a look at that. Because as they'll tell you on the Wikipedia page for the Jabbok, that it was the border of, but that separated Reuben and Gad, and that it was also the border of Ammon. And it's the place where near the Jabbok is where Jacob wrestled with the angel, from Arnon to Jabbok, even unto the children of Ammon, for the border of the children of Ammon was strong. Now, I don't actually think Jabbok is the border of Ammon, and there's a lot of reasons for that. But something that you have to run into when you start paying attention to what the descriptions you're given. For one thing, how could Reuben be here and Gad be here? And we know that Moab was somewhere in here, and we also have this land of the you have the Ammonites and the Amorites. The Amorites' land would have had to have been somewhere in here, and the Ammonites' land somewhere in here. Where do you fit all of this? Because remember, at that time, Yahweh was not allowing them to invade the land of the Ammonites or the Moabites. They weren't allowed to invade the land of the Edomites. And I really want to know how you fit everything in here. And you'll see, you pay attention to what's being said, and you're going to start asking yourself, how can all these things fit? Now, here's a passage. I'm going to wrap up with a couple of passages because I don't have a lot of time. This passage says, "Hear, O Yisrael, thou art to pass over Yarden this day, to go in to possess nations greater and mightier than yourself, cities great and fenced up to heaven." These nations were greater and mightier than Yisrael. Now, if you remember, Yisrael had, just at this time, they would have had either many hundreds of thousands of fighting men, military fighting men, or it could have been more. I know that when they left Mitzrayim, which was 40 years earlier, they had, all things told, maybe a couple million people. You're going to go in and possess nations greater and mightier than yourself. Yeah. Nations with an S, it's plural. There were nations that were greater and mightier than them. Where did they all fit? Even the Palestine today, you can give them both sides of the Jordan, and they're not going to sustain many nations including Israel, because they left a number of nations round about them, remember? They're not going to sustain all of these. Why would the Philistines, if they lived where we're being told they lived, why would they live there if they had more land to choose from? This place, I'm sorry, but it's crap. This whole area of the Gaza Strip. And I'm not saying that to demean the people that live there. I'm really not. I mean, it's crap for sustaining huge populations of people. Now, what else is interesting is in Deuteronomy 10:7. It's just a quick thing, but it's something else that gives you food for thought. It says, from thence they journeyed unto Gadgadah, and from Gadgadah to Yitbath, a land of rivers of water. There's so many lands around where they were going and places where they stayed that are described very differently than what you're going to find over here, because everything you have from down here, from below Jerusalem, from this area where we're told is Petra and Pella, Mount Seir, where Esau chose to go here, and then the Arabian desert, the Syrian desert, that's all you have. That's all you have. But in Deuteronomy 9:21, it says there was a Nahal, a river that descended from Mount Horeb or Mount Sinai. This did not happen where we're told. And there's a lot more to these Nahals and these Nairs that I could get into, but I don't have the time to. But there's just no way it could have happened there. And this is just more material for you to take a look at, to think about, especially these seas. And we'll get into the Nairs and the Nahals. And I want to show you something, because I just mentioned a few. There's a list right here, 25 words. These 25 words are all describing different kinds of water or water sources. 25 different words. And it's a lot. They're all over the place. Remember something, that when they were getting ready to go into Canaan, the land of promise, in Deuteronomy 8:7, Yahweh says he brings Yisrael into a land of Nahali Mayin and subterranean fountains that spring from mountains and valleys. He says, I bring you into a land of rivers of water and subterranean fountains that spring up from mountains and valleys. He said, a land where you will eat bread without want. And I'm just not seeing it. So I'm going to pick up on history, fiction, or science here within the week. But as I can, I'll keep producing videos about the language and geography. So, everyone, I really hope you take care of yourself and your neighbor. God bless.